right, welcome to episode 2 of the Snobcast. We're going to be discussing Prometheus. As always, this conversation will contain spoilers. We'll be discussing the movie from beginning to end.
Look, I'm just a geologist. I like rocks. I love rocks. Now, it's clear you two don't give a shit about rocks, but what you do seem to care about is gigantic dead bodies. And I don't really have anything to contribute in the gigantic dead body arena! I'm gonna go back to the ship, if you don't mind.
All right, let's get started. I'm your host, Jeff Bateman. With me today is David.
Heyo.
Steve.
Yo.
And Joseph.
Hello.
All right, and today, of course, we're talking about Prometheus. Let's talk about what our expectations were. Think about when you first saw this in the theater. What were you expecting?
Expectations probably come from the trailer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the trailer was cut in the same exact way as the 1979 Alien. It had that very distinctive sound effect. So it's like, oh, okay, so this is going to be...
A horror movie.
A horror movie. A sci-fi horror movie.
Like Alien, because we all had heard it was an Alien prequel, or maybe it's a remake, and, you know, that we kind of got over that when we first heard that news.
Yeah, because first of all, that doesn't make sense. Like, how can you have both? Like, it's got to be more or less one or the other, right?
You would think so.
You would think so. I mean, no sane person would do that, right?
Yeah. All right, well, let's get into it. So, the movie starts off. What happens? The opening shot, everybody talks about how great the opening scene is, and, you know, it does grab your attention. I thought it was pretty good.
It's a pretty good hook, right? You're
yeah.
Kind of, you know, I don't know if it's a mystery, but you're kind of curious about how it has to do with the rest of the movie.
So the opening scene is it looks like Niagara Falls, not Niagara Falls, but some big waterfall.
Slowly I turn.
And then a very large, pale man with very black eyes drinks some black goop, and then he disintegrates into the ocean, and he disintegrates, and yeah.
And he is looking fit, by
and
the way.
he looks really good.
Tight bodies,
Yeah.
loose plots.
I think the reason why he killed himself at the waterfall is because he realized that all alone he had no one to spot him.
That's true. What if he accidentally dropped one of those weights?
Those alien weights.
Those alien... they look like skeletons or something. Yeah, so we're not really sure. We get the idea that something is happening because it's showing DNA in 3D.
Yeah, he
blah,
drinks.
blah, blah.
He drinks the goo.
Yeah.
He falls in the water. He breaks apart. We go to, molecular level.
Mm-hmm.
The DNA breaks apart and joins back together.
But it joins back together to create life.
But so it joins back together
Prometheus.
with DNA that was on the planet already in the water.
I think so.
Yeah, some sort of other like microbes that are in there or something.
And maybe that was Earth. I'm assuming it's not, because I think that's actually probably going to be one of the twists they're going to try to pull, is that they didn't really create us.
Oh.
Or something like that.
So you mean all those centuries of Darwinism was correct?
Yeah. All that Darwinism. We'll get to that.
Yeah, maybe we could just skip ahead to that, like the idea of science. Like, I don't know if, like, the first Alien was a hard sci-fi movie, but...
The first Alien was a standard slasher flick, right?
With
Except
sci-fi-
placed in space.
Sci-fi trappings.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I felt like it kind of made more just general common sense than anything that we kind of see in this, where every decision that's made in this movie has to do with what we want to see in the script. And it's kind of like, why would people do that? Well, people wouldn't do it. The script told them to do it.
Well, this movie has a lot of sci-fi nonsense in it, and sci-fi nonsense is fine, but it's done very poorly in this. Like, there's a lot of just bad decisions they made, and a lot of bad lines that aren't scientific and don't make sense. Like, cheesy sci-fi and, like, crazy bending of the rules and physics is usually fine in a sci-fi movie, but I think this movie's trying to be a little more realistic, and they use a lot of scientific terms, but it's usually wrong.
Or just a lot of unscientific thinking in it. Or the supposed scientists don't have the kind of curiosity that you would expect a scientist to have, when they're in the situation that they're in. Like, you would expect them to I think perhaps on the writer's part they were afraid they might make it boring by making the scientists too much of brainiacs collecting rocks and, you know, being a little closer to how they would behave in that situation. Fuck the plane. I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna keep rolling even if not the plane was rolling. But
Fair.
like, you know, I mean, one example is the taking off the helmet scene.
Out of everybody that you talk to, I have talked to many people about this movie, and that is the one scene that they mention. I mean, if they're talking about like, man, that was disappointing or whatever, that is the one thing that they bring up. And there'll be another memorable scene later that we'll bring up that they always mention too.
It's just one of those things where it's like our Earth-based instruments detect no problems on this alien world. Let's take off our helmets. Why doesn't one character go, wait, but our instruments are as much as we know from Earth, like, or any other planets we've visited before. This is still one planet that may have that other thing that we're not ready for. So let's keep the helmets on. And sure enough, there are things out there that they weren't expecting, such as the fucking snake worm rape black goo creatures.
Which they didn't respond to like any human being, high or not,
Right.
would either. Nobody would respond to that. You're trapped in a cave and you baby talk
Yeah.
a deadly cobra, a vagina cobra.
No, look. Even though you haven't seen anything to suggest that this thing will attack you, you know, why are you going to cuddle up with that thing? How
No-
stupid are you?
no
Or you're a
clue.
scientist.
The scientists in this movie make a lot of bad decisions, and that's really ridiculous because I think if it was a $2 trillion scientific expedition, there'd be a lot of protocol, you know?
Yeah.
And I think number one on the list would be don't take your helmet off, but
Yeah,
they don't seem
exactly.
to have any kind of protocol or plan, really.
Playing devil's advocate, though, like I'm sure just to get it to fit, the writers would say, well, it's not like a government project. It's by this megaloman, you know.
Well,
I can't
because
even
that-
say the word.
Yeah, this is different
trillionaire.
because
Yeah, there you go.
this is different because it's a private company with so much money at stake. Yeah, like they
Yeah.
wouldn't have protocol.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also, I think it's trying to remind us of Alien and the way those characters were supposed to be like truckers in space, just everyday people in space, and that's
Yeah, but
they-
it was all right that they made poor decisions here and there because they were just truckers in space, whereas these are supposed to be scientists.
but they're the same characters.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and it should have been played a different way. Once you kind of realize that, there needs to be kind of like an adjustment made where it's like, oh, okay, maybe these people think differently than truckers in space.
Well, let's talk about the characters. What would you want to see in these characters? We talked about how they're not really good scientists.
I would have been happy if they went ahead and just took characters that worked from the previous movies and just implanted them into this one.
Well, I think Lisbeth Numi.
Elizabeth
Yeah,
Numi.
Elizabeth
Yes.
Numi was.
She's supposed to be Sigourney Weaver, right?
Yeah, and I think she did a good job, and her character's all right. Her character acted more or less like a scientist most of the time.
Well,
she did take her helmet off,
yeah.
but she fought against it.
And she's supposed to be a scientist who gathers facts, and she says, "This is what I believe because this is what I choose to believe." Like,
Don't get me started on that believe line.
So yeah, so there's the Ripley lookalike. There's the somewhat supposed to be tough guy Marine guy who's not a Marine, who's supposed to be a scientist for some reason, who we've dubbed Larry Hardy because he looks like Tom Hardy's brother. I really, seriously, when we were watching this movie, I thought that was Tom Hardy for halfway through the movie, and I was like, oh wait, it can't be,
yeah.
because he's the size of a truck because he's filming Dark Knight Rises. But like, I guess he's a character.
So after the alien drinks the stuff and dissolves, then we cut to the scientist, and they find a cave painting, which is for some reason important.
We should note that they act amazed at finding this cave painting. This is a huge discovery. Okay? This cave painting has been replicated by different cultures all over the world without any possible way of them being connected. So this is a big find.
Yeah, which they explain later. You don't know that at the beginning, though. You just think it's a cave painting, and, but that's fine.
But they are acting
yeah,
like it's a big
so
deal.
it gets you intrigued.
Yeah.
You're intrigued. So then I think in what we agreed when we were rewatching it is one of the best scenes in the movie is watching David kill time.
Yeah. That's a great sequence.
That should have started the movie.
Because
Absolutely.
honestly, that's something I've always thought about is the long periods of time. If you did, space travel, the time it takes and the cramped space that you're in, and it's fascinating.
What I don't understand though is I guess we don't know enough about how that robot technology works. Why couldn't they just turn him off or something?
I guess that the idea was just kind of like with Ash in the first movie, is that there needs to be somebody to have to look after the ship, make sure that something doesn't go wrong, or that they can kind of write something if something does happen.
Could be his own choice too, because he wants to spend the time learning and watching Peter O'Toole movies.
Right. That seems like that's a big part. We should also mention too, like that Ash was an android was a big reveal in the first Alien, and this one you kind of take that for granted. It's kind of everybody's like, oh, you're a robot. Robots are like
Nobody likes robots.
Yeah, they're like second-class citizens. Like, okay. But that goes back to the idea of having to see the first Alien to kind of get a lot of things out of this movie, because it depends on you knowing all this iconography and characters. So
far the movie's pretty interesting, even though we don't like the characters.
I think we kind of like David. He's interesting to watch.
Yeah. Then we're introduced to the whole crew of the ship. They all come out of cryosleep. Charlize Theron is the first one. She's doing push-ups.
She's tough.
Because she's tough.
She's a tough girl.
One.
While other people are throwing up, she's doing push-ups. Because she's a tough girl.
I bet she threw up.
We just didn't see it.
Yeah. So we get introduced to her, and she's a real tough one. And then we get introduced to the rest of the crew, which is a real grab bag of cliched characters.
Yeah, it feels like Ridley Scott opened up a sampler pack of cliched characters and just dumped it.
And why do you feel that way? Do you feel that way because they just don't have any backstory? They feel like they don't have any backstory.
They feel like they just started existing once the movie started rolling.
I wouldn't say that they're stereotypical characters so much as characters that say stereotypical lines, because they have no characterization other than that.
They exist just.
There's the biologist who's like, "Oh man, what's going on?" Like idiots.
I love biology. The biologist.
Yeah, we have the biologist and we have the geologist who's just in it for the money.
Mm-hmm. They don't say it, but they say things along the lines of, "I didn't sign up for this,"
Yeah. What was that guy's name?
Falafel.
I love rocks. I love falafel. I love falafels. I love rocks. And I love making money.
Do you know how hard it is to find falafel in deep space? Very hard.
All he got is Chinese food.
I know, they have tons of chopsticks. Okay, so the grab bag of characters, right?
Yeah, so we introduce them. We are introduced to the crew. We find out they were 2 years in cryo sleep. And then they wake up and they get briefed on the mission.
They get a hollow briefing.
They get a hollow briefing, a little hollow introduction, follow up by a little Rubik's Cube show.
By analyzing the information we have from everything to beginning to end, we assume that someone approached these guys and said, "We're not going to tell you the mission, but there's a lot of money involved, and you're going to go into cryosleep for 2 years, and you're going to go to the other side of the galaxy. Are you in or out?"
Sign me up.
Yeah, that's basically what happened, right?
Everybody said, "Yep." Haha, yep.
Yeah, so that's one of those things. I mean, that's something. I mean, I feel like that's something that would come up in a screenwriting class. If I wrote that, and brought it to school, I'd get an F.
That's one of the biggest crimes of the whole movie, is not developing why these guys decided to go and cryosleep for 2 years for no reason at all.
I don't think you would get an F, but your instructor would definitely say, like, you probably want to rethink that.
You should develop this a little bit more.
Ridley Scott help you with this?
Yeah, this seems like a Ridley Scott screenplay, and it's more perplexing with all the twists that happen later on, as to why it has to be so secretive.
Mm-hmm.
What's secret? Oh, you mean the mission is secretive? Yeah, we don't really know why. And that scene with the Rubik's Cube and the hologram, that's where a lot of bad science really starts. We find out it's all based on this ancient alien theory. Talking about there's a 5-planet system that are aligned, and the only system that matches it is this one out here. And, I think you need a few more measurements than some dots on a wall to define, a very specific system in the middle of space.
Yeah, you should give them their kudos. They were able to really kind of pinpoint. How many stars did they have on there? Like 7 stars?
Something like that, yeah.
And they're like, oh, we know exactly where to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And oh, what do you know? There's a little moon right there.
Yeah, they, with the setup, it could have worked if they had developed it enough as to why, therefore, this means this.
If Ridley Scott and the writers wanted the story to be about these engineers that came to Earth and made us, couldn't they have thought of a different way they left evidence instead of this bullshit conspiracy theory? You know?
I don't know. Maybe he really...
You're saying that it was an invitation to come visit them?
Come on, knock on their door?
Yeah.
It led them there. I mean, that's what the movie is telling us.
Yeah.
That's the kicking off point for the movie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they could have just misread the cave paintings.
Well, what would those cave
Watch
Stay
out for those
away.
fucking guys.
Stay away from here. No.
do we have any hint that it could be misread?
Look out for these.
Yeah, do not go here.
Go anywhere but here.
Wow.
That'll be the big reveal in the sequel.
Dun, dun, dun.
Cut to David's face. Oh my.
Oh, we definitely should not have gone here. I am just ahead. I am not... Oh, you know what? Actually, they could put the robot legs on David's head. Just walk around.
He's just a head and 2 legs.
Where were we? We're so lost. We are so lost.
Yeah, so there's some bad science in that scene. The guy says Darwinism. She talks about this is what I choose to believe as a scientist.
And the only reason that is in the movie is to say like, oh, okay, she's a scientist, but she also has faith, quote unquote. That's the only reason it's there, right?
Yeah, because the movie thinks it's making some sort of commentary on religion.
Or it thinks it's being like John Locke and whoever, the guy who cries all the time,
John Cryer?
Don't even start. We're not
Michael
getting
Fox,
into that.
We're not going into laws.
Michael Foxbender.
Matthew Fox.
I want to see that Photoshop by the end of the day. I want to see it. Michael Foxbender.
So they get the mission explained to them. Nobody's on board. Everybody seems to be against these 2 scientists. And they're wishing they would have told them this before they left Earth.
It's like, man, I really could have...
That's kind of your own stupid fault for leaving on this mission without being briefed as to what it was about.
Right.
Yeah, and then we land on the planet. They're flying in. They find some, sort of pyramid structures, and he says, God doesn't build in straight lines. Which is just another...
He also says that during a scene in which they're trying to find the place that they're going to. So they make it kind of seem like they didn't have any way to kind of plan ahead of time.
That bugs me, though, because that is a quote from the Ancient Aliens show on the History Channel.
Is it really? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Wow.
When they're talking about the Nazca lines.
They say God doesn't draw in straight lines?
Something like that.
So,
But they said they found straight lines, so aliens therefore did it.
Well, of course, because God doesn't draw in straight lines.
Well,
it's like intelligent
okay.
design.
Yeah.
So Ridley Scott obviously saw George Tsoukalos.
He saw Giorgio Tsoukalos, and I think he ate it up.
Yeah. He loved that hairstyle. But that's the perfect example of using this weird, vague kind of high school theology versus science. I don't even know if it's theology versus science.
Seeing giant straight lines disproves intelligent design?
No,
We're still stuck on this.
It proves intelligent design because God does not... Oh, whoa.
No, you said God does not draw in straight lines.
Yeah.
So seeing giant straight lines on a planet disproves.
God exists.
No.
Proves
It,
that God
it
exists?
proves alien life.
Yeah, that was more annoying me on
that
the
level?
fact of the alien life, because he's already implying that God created the planet, and then the aliens...
Like, the aliens didn't create the planet,
What?
though.
No, God doesn't draw in straight lines. Already implies that God created the Earth.
Right.
Something else created these natural-looking things that are in a straight line.
Okay, got it. Got it.
Do you understand what I'm
Okay.
saying?
And it's possible that
You just blew my mind, Jeff.
that Larry was being facetious because, you know, he's kind of out there to prove that God doesn't exist and meet some aliens.
That must be a difficult relationship because she wears a crucifix all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time.
In
Even
fact,
probably during some of the times.
What?
Yeah.
even after, well, we can't skip ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, so they land on the planet. They say something about terraforming. He wants to open his Christmas presents, so they go.
That is a lie.
It's Christmas.
That is a lie.
But it is Christmas. He was being pretty witty. He was.
What is the movie saying with the fact that they landed on Christmas Day?
Oh.
Or is it just another one of those things again that the movie's just sort of throwing out there to make it feel as though it's about something more than it actually is?
I think it's incidental. I think actually the only reason it would be there is to give you some sort of connection to the time of year that it's supposed to be.
You don't think they're trying to make some sort of
Birth of the Savior sort of thing?
I don't think so.
But I don't think they mind you asking those questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Because when you
exactly.
once you see through that, the movie's pretty shitty.
Yeah. I don't know. I kind of see it more in the way of something that's kind of manipulative in terms of just trying to make a horror movie, where it's, whenever there's specific holidays in horror movies, that's supposed to play to that certain memory that you have of that holiday or whatever. I think Christmas is a pretty obvious one for that.
But this wasn't really set during Christmas. There wasn't anything else Christmassy besides the little Christmas tree and the one line
That he has to open his presents.
So they put that in there. It wasn't this
yeah.
movie's going to be set during Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, we're just going to put in this little part about Christmas. And hey, why can't it be Christmas?
But what savior would have been birthed?
That is the question.
I mean, were they going there looking for a savior, and then they found out that they had vagina snake? Waylon was looking for eternal life.
But yeah, they land on the planet, and then they go inside what they call a pyramid. It doesn't really look like a pyramid.
No, it's not shaped like a pyramid. It has a giant skull on top of it.
Yeah, there's a skull on the outside.
It kind of
nobody seems to care.
Kind of looks like a Devo hat.
Yeah.
Less like a pyramid, more like a Devo hat.
Yeah.
They find some goo,
Mm-hmm.
and then a hologram shows up with some elephant man running around.
Elephant spaceman.
Yeah.
See, do you see how hard this is to describe what happens in this movie?
Yeah, this is difficult.
This is so tough.
This is really.
Yeah, going through this movie step by step is really ridiculous. And
I don't think I don't think a step-by-step analysis of the stupidity is going to work.
Yeah.
I don't think you can do it.
We
It
keep
can't
wanting
be done.
We keep wanting to talk about other things.
to jump ahead.
Yeah.
So maybe there would be certain themes or certain devices that would be helpful to talk about.
I think we got to criticize this movie more, just sort of broad and sort of in broad things about. But do we want to count Prometheus in the Alien anthology? Does it?
That's a good question.
Is it so different that it doesn't even fit at all in any of them?
Well, I have decided to ignore it when it comes to the Alien anthology because I really love those movies. And I love the mythology, and I think this screws that all up for me. I don't like that we're getting more or less an origin story for the alien. So I'm just pretending it didn't happen.
It's getting
Each Alien movie does have its own characteristic too, like the Mission Impossible movies. So they kind of are, and then they kind of aren't in each other's same universe to begin with. If Prometheus is in the Alien anthology, it is the worst of all of them. And we're talking 3, and we're talking Resurrection. Worse than those ones.
Wow.
Honestly.
That's a bold statement, my friend.
No, come on. I give 3 a real break. I kind of.
No, I do.
I don't hate 3 as much as a lot of other people hate 3. I like the different angle Fincher was taking with it, and especially we're following Cameron's aliens here. And Resurrection has got some fun parts in it. Resurrection is the Star Trek Voyager of the Alien movies, and it's the more goofy, lighthearted, fun. Who's the big ugly guy?
Ron Perlman.
Ron Perlman.
Ron Perlman's fun.
I would say at this point it's getting pretty easy to ignore bad prequels or bad sequels because, know it or not, one of those Alien versus Predator movies kind of added on the alien mythology because you see what Wayland looks like, and it looked like Bishop. What's his name? Lance Henriksen. So I find that pretty easy to ignore. I don't think that has anything to do with anything. So, and you know, after prequelitis, it's pretty easy to ignore all this stuff and try to put it out of your mind.
Yeah.
I think it's so obvious that it's trying to be its own movie too, in a weird way. That was the thing that really.
Well, I heard Scott wanted to make it both a movie that could be self-contained and a movie that leads to a sequel at the same time.
And that's pretty much saying like you want to build a car and a submarine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's very tough to do. And why would you do that?
Well, it can be done, but it's going to look pretty stupid.
It's going to look pretty, and stuff about it's not going to make sense. There's just going to be some.
That's a very good metaphor.
There's some
There'll be
general.
some bad science.
There's bad science
There's
involved.
going to be some bad science involved.
It's like it's going to be rough. It's going to be rough.
Well, let's kind of get into the meat of the movie. The movie takes a while to get going, like Alien.
It was something that occurred to us that in talking about whether it was supposed to be a prequel, a reboot, or what was the third one? Its own individual movie. Mm-hmm. Where along those lines those decisions were made, because we were talking about like in the first 45 minutes it feels like an Alien reboot, where it's like an Alien reimagining. And then after that, that's where it totally kind of goes off the cliff.
Yeah, once they bring that head back and it explodes...
That feels like Alien.
It kind of feels like Alien, but I feel like that's where the movie starts to kind of go in its own crazy direction.
Completely.
Do you think that this was a movie that was supposed to be originally just like an Alien reboot, and then Scott turned on the History Channel, and then went, "Oh, I got an idea." And then
that's the impression that I get, because you have a feeling somewhere along the line, somewhere in shooting, it doesn't, because they didn't have time to think of it in terms of script, because you would be like, "Oh, whoa, we need to fix this before we actually make this movie." It's like, "Oh, I just heard this thing, mate, about ancient aliens, where aliens came to Earth, and they made us, mate." And it's like, well, that's great. That's great, Ridley, but we're making a prequel to Alien.
Yeah.
You know, that thing you did when you were
it's
much younger.
And there's nothing in all 4 Alien movies that calls for an Ancient Aliens addition to it.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I remember a long time ago when they rehashed the Alien Anthology box set, there was some interviews on there with the producers. They had the same producers. David Giler was on there, and he was saying like, "Oh, the only place to go next is to go to LV-426 and explain where the alien comes from. That's what everybody wants to see." It's like, nobody wants to see that, you madman.
Yeah.
Like, that's the worst thing that you could do.
It's like now everyone wants to see Yoda fight with a
lightsaber.
But I thought the point of the alien in the movie Alien was that it was alien.
That it was mysterious.
It also was based on something that you will never be able to find on Earth. That it was so weird looking and it was so different. It had a mouth and a mouth. That they were making a true alien movie that wasn't like Greys, which are humanoid. I mean, it was a little humanoid, but it was so contorted with the H.R. Geiger twist on it that it was totally a truly alien creature.
You never got a very good look at it, and that's one of the things that kind of made it intimidating. And yeah, it's nothing that you could have a context for.
Yeah.
And Prometheus doesn't really even have a monster. I mean, that's also where it goes away from Alien, is that there is no kind of bad guy, or there is a bad guy, but there's no monster in this movie.
One of the common themes through all the Alien movies, too, is that the corporation, quote-unquote, is the bad guy. Does that kind of continue on into this movie, do you think? Or
I think Wayland's the bad guy in this movie.
Okay.
And you can sort of argue whether or not David is, which I think is what makes him the only interesting character in this movie.
Because you're not really sure what his motivations are. You kind of have a feeling that he's jealous or he feels resented by people, but
he's not supposed to have feelings.
I think it's a combination of like,
both.
He is jealous, but then they are also jealous of him, or at least Larry Hardy is.
Why would Larry Hardy be jealous of
Because David was able to absorb so much information and so many facts, and have an easy time of it.
And
that's where they have their first little altercation.
That's
where
true.
David's like, "That's why it's called a thesis."
Yeah, that's true. It would make that would be much more interesting if I felt like Larry Hardy was an actual scientist and not just like this football player that they brought onto the crew.
Right.
Yeah, just bros in space.
Yeah.
But then
yeah.
there's a lot of parts where it seems like David's feelings are hurt, which he shouldn't have in the first place.
Exactly. So that's what we were joking about, the
Wait.
idea of them like bridging Blade Runner universe. And
Does David have feelings?
you get an impression that he does,
Okay.
but he's also supposed to be an android. He's supposed to be programmed that way. I think that's what that line is in there. It's like, oh, well, I wear a helmet because
Well, yeah.
you people are more comfortable dealing with me with a helmet on, or whatever the line is.
You don't like my smelly face.
I look like an effeminate British man because you prefer effeminate British men. You know, I don't know what the
Well,
reason.
and doesn't Larry Hardy say something along the lines of like, "Well, it's a good thing you don't have feelings, bro." Like,
Yeah, yeah.
You've been feeling so much stuff right now.
And remember when it did that snap zoom into David's face and a single tear came down his cheek? Oh, I do have feelings, though. I do.
Well, when David finds that ancient alien engineer in that pod, he puts his ear to it, and he smiles. You see him put a smile. It's like rockabye engineer.
Baby bye,
Yeah.
Betty bye.
But getting to where this movie really goes crazy is when the head explodes, and it's not too long after that we get that scene with those mutant worms. So first of all, why were there even any kind of worm in this cave ship thing?
It does end up being just a ship. Yeah.
And what happened?
Well, we had a couple
Black goo.
guesses on that. Either those the worms that you see initially are indigenous and being mutated, or this goo, whatever it is like super semen or something, and it's just creating and genetically mutating things at an incredibly advanced rate.
I think that's what it is. They were originally little worms, but then David messed with one of the pots. The goo came down out of the pot, and then you see the worms festering in the goo down there.
Because you do have that one throwaway shot of them walking around, and there's those little mealworms, and I'm guessing, I mean, that's the best educated guess you could make in this movie.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And it's not done.
Yeah.
It's not done in a way that's like, ooh, oh man, there's so many clues in here, and you could figure it out. It's kind of like it's all just mishmash.
But I mean, maybe when they go through that hatch and the door unseals, that's the spaceship, and then the outside is the cave system built around it.
Okay. Well,
So they bring the worms into the spaceship
from the outside.
from the outside.
Okay.
Because that was terraformed in there.
But here's my question: what were the hologram elephant men running away from?
I'm assuming it's some sort of squid monster like we see later in the movie.
Wouldn't that have been hologrammed as well?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Yeah, they don't really explain that. Maybe the way the hologram technology works, you have to like be...
Well, wait for the sequel.
Yeah.
I mean, is that really what we're doing at this point? We're just like, oh, all will be answered, and why all of these plot holes are.
That's
in this movie.
what this movie does most of the time, and that's really not fair because that's not a movie.
That's not a movie. No.
That's half a movie.
No. And that's what it comes down to with me, is just like this idea of like, you can be ambiguous, that's great, but you kind of have to have an idea when you're creating it as to what the answer is, which I feel like that's what the ambiguity in Blade Runner is, where it's kind of fun to argue one way or the other.
You at least feel that there's like a foundation of something underneath, and it gives you enough to take and speculate over.
Like, even if the writer had one idea and the director had another, and they're totally opposing, they both put those ideas in there together to where you could kind of make up your own opinion and it would make sense in terms of the story. That did not happen at all in any form or fashion in Prometheus. It was kind of like, let's make it up, let's make a movie as we go. That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
And so you can't get attached to any of the characters or anything.
So they get attacked by the snakes. One of them just dies. The other one comes back as like a zombie monster later in the movie. And there's also the black ooze that is given to Larry Hardy, which just makes him really sick.
You think he would have turned into a zombie throwing people around the place and stuff like that?
That's a really good point. He ingested that stuff, but he didn't really transform. He just had a bellyache. He just had to be set on fire.
He just had a little worm in the eye.
Yeah, he just had little eye worms. And they toasted him.
So David takes some of the black goo in his little man purse. He brings it back to the ship. He cracks it open, pulls out a little blob. And what does he do with it?
He gets it on his fingertip, and then he decides to go speak with Larry Hardy. And Larry Hardy, because he's a character we can't identify with and he's unscientific, feels as though the whole mission has been a complete failure, even though they have before them a wealth of newly discovered evidence which is above and beyond the moon landing.
I think it's above.
There was the moon landing, and then there was this mission that they're on right now.
I feel like it's above and beyond finding that cave painting, which they were. That's why I brought that up. Is like this is a big discovery. That's like, oh, this is the biggest discovery that we not only we have made, but this is a huge step for humankind in its history. And then they land and they find this warehouse with all these jars and all that stuff with a human face, a giant human stone face, and they're like,
And then so Larry
I've had
Hardy
better.
decides to drink and slump himself on a pool table and go. The reason why he's
Space
depressed
pool.
is because
space. Yeah, it is space pool. It has shiny billiard
space
balls.
billiards with the chrome billiard balls, of course, because it's the future and it's space. And so he decides to slump himself on that billiard table and drink himself into a depression because he wished he could have spoken with them, and they couldn't find any sentient beings to speak with.
Yeah.
So therefore, to him, the mission was a complete failure.
Finding a humanoid life form on another planet isn't enough for him.
No, you got to be able to talk sports with the guy. What do you think? What are our chances?
Being able to take the head into another room and analyze the head was not good enough, you know. So,
To be fair, they didn't so much analyze it as they did blow it up.
Right.
They promptly ran electricity through it and blew it up.
Because they were doing science stuff. They were doing science stuff with the head. And so while this pathetic sorry excuse for both a scientist and as a human being is schlumping himself drinking on this table, in comes a robot, an android, David, with a little bit of that black goop on his finger, and he dips his finger into this cup of, what was it, scotch or
Champagne.
Space scotch.
space champagne or something? Was it champagne?
It was space champagne.
You wonder, did they really realize what they were doing with this scene? We've got one guy who's supposed to be a scientist who is neither a human being in terms of how he's behaving with the situation, nor is he a scientist in how he's reacting to the evidence that they found and their place in mankind's history as to what's going on. And then we've also got an android who is possessing the human quality of curiosity, and not only that, he's seeing what's going to happen if he makes Larry Hardy ingest this black goo, which is an experiment he's running, which is science. So we've got a human being which is not a scientist, and we've got an android which is a scientist and behaving more human.
Yes.
Chronologically, though, doesn't that happen right after David has his little rendezvous with Wayland?
That's right.
In the dream pod?
Yeah.
So isn't it possible that he is following orders?
Perhaps.
Because
I wish we could have known the extent of that conversation. Maybe if he heard him say, yes, I'll run the experiment or something like that.
Right.
Make it sound like that's really more of him following orders than him doing something which is of his own curiosity.
Well,
But what he said was, try harder.
Try harder.
So
Okay.
so you know
Okay.
what he does is he goes and gets the alien goop and he goops Larry Hardy.
Goops him up.
And Larry Hardy goes this like bipolar switch from, oh, we're such a failure, we didn't get to talk to the aliens, to, I think I want to get laid, let me go tell my girlfriend how amazing we are.
Yeah, that makes no sense
So we can
whatsoever.
have another like semi-philosophical conversation about religion.
What exactly was talked about in that? I don't even remember.
I remember...
Was that you don't need the cross
That's
anymore?
the scene where he says you don't need this anymore, and then she says, "Well, who created the aliens?"
Yeah. Well,
and then,
you
like,
got a point.
But he says something which allows her to say, but I can't create life, which is I'm barren or something like that, right?
Right. Which is also, yeah, it plays into later events.
What is the why does it
Again,
matter that
it's
she
a-
can't have
it's a-
Children?
It's a virgin birth thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
Christmas.
Well, no,
Yeah.
it's not virgin birth, but she's supposed to be barren, and then this is an immaculate conception.
It's
I
a
guess.
Festivus miracle, is what it is.
So she's supposed to be barren. I'm glad you brought that up because I can't think of a reason why that's in the movie. But bringing up the Christmas thing,
It's a miracle.
yeah,
It's a Christmas miracle.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that whole scene is very awkward to begin with because they just had this sad conversation. She's a little teary-eyed over the fact that she's talking about how she's barren and she can't conceive children. And then Larry Hardy goes, I know the solution to this awkward moment. I'm gonna jump your bones right now.
And it works.
Yeah, it works.
Wouldn't the thing about her being barren have more effect if it was something like a storyline from the second Alien movie where like she finds a surrogate daughter, that type of thing? Because I was trying to think of what is the reason that this bit of information is in this movie, and the only thing I could think of is to kind of play into the thing later on where it's like, oh yeah, 6 months pregnant or whatever it was. It's like, that's impossible.
Yeah.
I'm barren, and I've been in cryostasis for like 2 years, and I don't really like men, and I'm quite lonely. Like, it's just like all of these reasons why it couldn't happen. But like, why else is in there other than, I guess, that vaguely symbolic reason that you brought up? What else would that be in there for?
I don't know.
Again, it just feels like there is more. There's more material than substance, for lack of a better way of explaining.
There's a lot of content.
There's a lot of content, but not a lot of substance, or not a lot of. There's not really a foundation of meaning and reason and thought and logic behind it.
Yeah.
Well, could that be all the sort of Lost style add-ons for to try and create substance?
Yeah, that's kind of Lost-ish.
I think so.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of big questions and kind of, big ideas that make you think. And if you don't pay attention, it seems like it's really smart,
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a Banksy, graffiti art, where you see a violent image and a peaceful, cute image just put together and slapped on a wall, and you think, for your first inclination is to go that something deep is happening, but nothing really deep is happening.
It's a juxtaposition,
if you will.
if you will.
Yuck, yuck, yuck. Speaking of juxtapositions,
Yes.
How about that tone business? Maybe we should talk about that.
I think that's one of the most important things in terms of just putting a story together. And I think that's what we were talking about. It's like it kind of has to decide what you're supposed to be feeling at what time. And at least in 3 different parts of this movie, it decides that it wants to have it both ways. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to be terrified and tense, but you're also supposed to be filled with wonder. And it's very tough to do in the course of like 5 minutes, which is what it tries to do.
I'm kind of reminded of when they were showing the behind the scenes of them trying to edit together episode 1, where we had a goofy moment with Jar Jar Binks, and they're trying to intersplice that with the high, with the intensity of the Darth Maul fight, and also the dog fighting happening outside, and you're kind of all over the place. You don't know quite how to feel. They did a better job of trying to mix it together in Return of the Jedi, which we had the cute Ewoks fighting the stormtroopers, and then there was also the stuff happening up there in the Emperor's palace.
I think that all of those events, though, kind of connected with each other. The Emperor was saying, like, hey, these are your friends are going to die, you better join me, blah, blah, blah. And then, like, there was the battle on the ground, the battle, Lando was in the space battle.
The stuff happening in the Emperor's palace, that's more about internal conflict.
Yeah. But it all connects. Like, we know all of these characters, and all of these events are happening in this larger story event. The things that are happening in Prometheus
would be Larry Hardy dying of the disease, and then the magical wonder Disney scene with the hologram galaxy.
You put it kind of gently. He didn't die of a disease. He was burnt to a crisp by Charlize Theron with a flamethrower because she didn't want him coming onto the ship.
Yeah, let's talk about that that scene. I'm not really sure. I felt like Charlize Theron in that scene because she burns him, and the look on her face is, "What's going on?" Because I don't feel like the movie even knew what we were supposed to be feeling at that point.
Yeah. I don't even know. I thought we were supposed to be sad because we cut to Elizabeth going, "No, Oklahoma, where the wind blows."
Yeah.
She's crying no, and the music does get kind of sad, and it turns slow motion-y, and it's in soft focus, and it feels like it's supposed to be.
And
it does a gladiator thing.
It does a fade to white.
Yeah.
And then she wakes up in that bed, and that's when she finds out she's pregnant.
Yeah.
But back to him being before he was torched. I couldn't help but think how much better that scene would have been if he just like wandered off into the landscape. Why did he have to die right then and there? He could have just said, like, forget about me, like, I'm lost. There could have been something other than him being flamethrower.
Well, she had the flamethrower already.
And I think that kind of hurts to die from space worms.
Yeah.
So he kind of wanted to end it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think that there could have been a better way to end that.
There could have been a better way to do a lot of things in this movie.
And that's ultimately the point. That's why we're having such difficulty, I
Well,
think.
again, when you talk about dealing with him being sick, it leads back to the central stupidity of the characters. And why didn't he go to sickbay with his worm eyeballs? Like, why did he have to bro it up and tough it out? Yeah, I got worms in my eyes. I don't care. I'm gonna go on this scientific expedition anyway because I'm a fucking scientist, dude.
I
All
would
right, babe, let's go do some science stuff together. I'll be alright. I'll tough. I'll walk it off.
just looking at a bell curve, to use a science term, I think it's safe to say 8 out of 10 people would go immediately to a doctor if they saw worms coming out of their eyes. Is that safe to say?
I think that is safe to say. How wouldn't the world's toughest, ballsiest man, after seeing worms crawling out of his eyes, don't you think he would be like, okay, I gotta go see a doctor.
He doesn't have insurance.
Damn you, Obama.
Goddamn pre-existing conditions.
So, like, yeah, again, that cuts also to these supposed human beings aren't even really being human beings, for us to relate to. Because everyone in the theater is screaming, go tell somebody.
Yeah.
Get your freaking eyes looked at.
Yeah.
Kill yourself.
Maybe David has a vaccine. Now, of course, that's kind of silly to think, but maybe he's Mr. Know-It-All who's been analyzing this crap, and you're on a ship full of scientists. Maybe the combined powers of their minds could come together and they could solve this problem for you.
Use your minds to help us. Actually, it's interesting that you bring that up because that seems like a natural scene to have where he'd be like, hey, David, what is going on with me? And seeing his reaction would give you a clue onto what his stance is, right? Like if he reacts like, oh, I don't know. Or if he's like, yes, this is...
I have no idea.
I have no idea what's happening. Keep it going, though.
We'll just have to see what happens and
Yeah.
get you in cryostasis and bring you back to
Yeah, then we would know, like, oh, okay. Like, so he's in on that. It would kind of give you a hook into the movie, basically, instead of being incredibly baffled.
And throughout this movie, I think what we're hearing with our criticisms is we are constantly yearning to be part of this movie. But this movie doesn't want us to be a part of it. We're actually fighting, and we're trying our best to involve ourselves in this movie, but this movie will not have it. It will stop us every step of the way from getting
Yeah, every
in.
time you think you're going to like this movie, it throws a vagina worm at you, or exploding head, or a squid baby.
Well, in its own way, I think it's kind of interesting that we had talked about The Master before, because that's also kind of a difficult quote-unquote movie that you kind of feel like, oh, well, maybe I just wasn't paying attention, like maybe I missed something. But it's in its craft, it's being kind of vague or ambiguous. But in this one, it's not in the craft. It's you missed things and you feel confused because there aren't any answers there.
Because what the problems that we are seeing in this movie is due to negligence.
Yes. I don't want to say not caring, but not realizing that answers need to be put in to some extent.
I don't really know if it's so much negligence. I think these guys knew what they were doing. They just... It's not that they weren't paying attention to things or let things get out of control. They wanted to be confusing. They think that that's a good thing.
Maybe they kept going with it. Like they added a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and then at the end you see it and you're like, we put too many confusing things in here. It's like, well, we got to release this movie though.
Maybe it's in terms of the quantity of confusing things.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to the first Alien. We were introduced to a very weird shaped spaceship, and there was that space jockey there, and then there was that kind of laser. What was that containment thing that was going on above the eggs? It was kept in some sort of thing that was like a...
It's like a force field.
Yeah, but they could still walk in it.
By the way, that's a pretty big thing to skim over too, because they find the space jockey, and based on how our characters react is how we understand what is going on in the movie. They don't act like, wow, this crazy elephant skeleton man. We've never seen one of these before. They say like, yeah, well, this is weird, but like, hey, what's this room full of eggs? Like, we haven't seen those before. They don't act surprised by everything that they see. They just don't know how to react to this like biological thing. They haven't seen that before.
Right, okay.
Well, I think each character takes a different perspective when they enter the chamber.
Uh-huh.
Because you've got Numi, who she goes for the corpse.
Mm-hmm.
David goes for the bottles, and then Larry Hardy looks around and says, "This is another fucking tomb."
Right. He's very disappointed.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the original Alien, the 1979 Alien, like they intentionally put that in there where, you know, the space jockey was in there, but it's kind of glossed over. But we're not confused. We're not like, hey, wait, what, you know, what about this space jockey? What does that have to do with the plot? It's just kind of like, it's a gateway into the rest of the story. And I think it's one of the most interesting aspects of the first Alien movie, that it isn't even addressed, actually. I think it's pretty interesting. It's just kind of taken for granted. But we don't feel like we're shortchanged, like, hey, the rest of that Alien movie didn't make any sense. Where'd that spaceship come from? You know, it was just part of one of the mysteries of the movie. Just kind of like where the alien came from. We weren't quite sure.
We pretty much are set by the time John Hurt gets the thing on his face. Because everything leads to another thing. Because once the thing gets on his face, everything that happened before, we're kind of okay with moving on from at that point. Because John Hurt just got a rape creature on an oral rape creature on his face.
A genuine rape creature.
And creatures are bursting out of his stomach, and it's getting big, and it eats, who's that guy who's after the kitty? Crap. Who's that guy? Who's that actor? What's his name? He's got a funny face.
He's got a scrotum face.
He was in a Repo.
Repo Man.
What is his name? Jack.
Sparrow.
You know who that?
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I just don't know his name.
Larry Hagman?
That's it.
Thank you.
Larry Hagman. So Larry Hardy gets all burned up.
Right.
And then we get to the scene that everybody but me thinks is a good scene.
Oh, I can't wait. What is it?
The famous space abortion scene.
Yeah, so...
the only problem I really had with the space abortion scene was the fact that they tried to amp up the suspense by saying that this machine was for men only, which is stupid on so many
I don't
levels.
think that's the only reason they did that. I think that's supposed to be some sort of other little clue to the fact that Waylon's alive.
But you find out that he's alive 30
Anyway,
seconds later.
Yeah. So it's pointless to plant that seed of suspicion anyway.
Yeah.
Because the two events are so close.
And on top of that, too, you're not even thinking about that. You're like, oh, man, we got to get this alien out of my body.
Yeah.
You're not thinking like, I wonder if that old man's alive. I bet he's lying. Why would you be thinking that? It's
Why
so...
I don't
not?
know.
This machine is only for old men anyway.
It shows like a little outline of Wayland.
If we're gonna go say that this because of Wayland, then why does it say please input your passcode, which only Wayland would know?
Or maybe it scans you, and if it detects no
Retinal
old man,
scan. You are not Wayland.
Yeah, if it
Because
doesn't,
then the movie will be over.
if it doesn't detect old man makeup, it rejects you. It just spits you out the other side.
Yeah, why in the world does Guy Pearce have to play the oldest man in the world?
This is the thing that we were talking. I have no clue why. I mean, there are elderly actors in the world that surely could say those lines with dignity. I dare say even Ian McKellen would have been a better choice. As distracting as
Why
that would have
not?
been. I mean, my choice was Peter O'Toole because I thought that would have been nice because of the Lawrence of Arabia. But I mean, I guess my point is that there's so many different things that you could do. I don't know why that was the thing to do, other than maybe just in terms of business, they needed another actor that people knew. I guess people know Guy Pearce. Do you know Guy Pearce? Do you know who he is? Would that bring you in?
When you say Guy Pearce, I think the Time Machine.
Okay. Ooh, wow. I saw the Time Machine.
That's really what Guy Pearce does for me. Is I just think about.
So
Time
not
Machine.
Memento, not the Proposition.
No. I'm thinking of the
Time Machine. Interesting.
But Guy Pearce in old man makeup is just one of those weird decisions this movie makes that it didn't have to. Mm-hmm. You know?
Well, let's go back to that space abortion scene and why you didn't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm just curious. Because I thought
idea?
out of a movie that's really all over the place, I think that was the closest to body horror, like the original kind of idea.
That was sci-fi horror right there. It had sci-fi and it had horror. She's being cut up by a machine.
I just didn't care at all about
really?
what was happening.
Really?
Maybe that's because I was so checked out by that point when I saw
You
the
know
movie.
what? You could have started the movie with her getting the space abortion, and I would have found that to be a really tense scene, even though we're just being introduced to her. She's only 2 seconds old in my mind, and she's getting in that machine. I would have still been pretty, you know.
There's
Scary.
also a correlation, I think, in all of our minds between aliens, the 4 Aliens movies, and creatures bursting inside of you,
Yeah.
bursting out of you. That's creepy. And, that's the only thing that really reflects back.
Maybe that's why I didn't like it, because it felt like it was a scene they had to do or something.
I felt like the reverse. I felt like they had to do it, but they found a new way to kind of dress it up in a way
to do it.
I think
They
that's
found a way to dress it up in
I
a way you
think
haven't seen before.
That's one of the few actual creative parts of the movie for me, is because this is a surgery machine. How many other movies have a surgery machine in it?
I'm sure like UA Bowl probably has some
Perhaps,
movie
but that
has a
surgery machine, not only do we have a surgery machine, which is an interesting thing to see, in action, but it's being used for something other than what it was meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is being used to extract an alien out of it. So the stakes and the levels of the weirdness of it all, that's actually pretty interesting, and they execute it pretty well, and the special effects were all right, and when it's cutting her open, that's creepy, and when it's separating the parts, opening it up, that's creepy, and when the clamp goes inside, that's creepy.
Why is that creepy? Were you afraid it wasn't going to work or something?
Because the thought of getting cut up is it's unsettling. It's just
Yeah, I think I think what he's
It's
saying.
horrifying.
What he's saying is that that's the only part of the movie that you could put yourself into.
And a lot of it was shot from kind of her perspective too. Looking down the stomach from the heads over the shoulder and stuff like that. Of course, it did exactly what I would expect would happen, but that doesn't make it any less disturbing that it was happening. And she pulls the umbilical cord out, and
Maybe I'm just so desensitized, and like I said, I really didn't care about the movie or the characters by that point. It didn't do anything for me. I did cringe when she pulled that umbilical cord out. That's pretty gross.
I should note, we all had different points in the movie where we checked out. And I think all of our experiences were like we're going to give this movie a shot, and it wasn't, and that's what's so weird. There wasn't one spot where we're like, this kind of crossed the line.
And I think I checked out the earliest.
I think you did, yeah.
And your checkout was when?
During the briefing scene where she says it's what I choose to believe.
That was so early. That was like 15
Man.
minutes into the movie, maybe even earlier.
Wow. And who checked out the latest? Was it
me?
you?
Yeah.
Hung in there for a long time.
Wait, when did you check out?
My final checkout. My final checkout was at the flamethrower scene on the.
And that's before the flute?
I think that is before the flute. I could be wrong. It's around the same time though, because
Yeah,
I remember we were
yeah,
talking
that's
about.
that's when I.
No, that's during
No,
the flute, because
that's-
that's the scene that we were complaining
Yeah.
about earlier, where it's cutting back and forth.
The tone shifts around too much.
So it's the same. So we
I
did the
think
same.
it ends though on the the flamethrower scene.
Yeah.
That the flamethrower scene is the last part of that weird sequence of tone shifting.
But there was just something about it that was. I was thinking about that. It was so manipulative. Like I'm supposed to care about this Larry Hardy guy. Don't just torch me, babe.
Who's an idiot and an asshole, and he's
like-
not even a scientist.
I don't like it. And then it didn't make. I guess in a way it made sense that Charlize Theron's character would be like, don't bring this infected guy on there. But at the same time, kind of like what you were talking about with the surgery machine, it's like I felt like that scene had to be in the movie just because there was a scene in Alien in which they didn't want to bring John Hurt onto the ship. And then they did, and then it caused a ruckus. Everything was...
Yeah.
Because they broke that protocol
Yeah,
of bringing
yeah.
somebody infected, and that it let the alien on board, basically. That's why I felt it is. So when I saw that and then
Well,
how they treated that.
The next time they open a hatch for someone, to be fair, he does go on a little kill spree.
He does go on a kill spree.
And how do we know that Tom Hardy wouldn't have turned into one of those zombie mutant things?
That's why I'm waiting for Prometheus 2. Promethei.
The return of Tom Hardy.
Prometheus.
Rise of the Prometheus. There's a lot of rising going on.
Prometheus rises.
So after Elizabeth has her space abortion, she finds old man Waylon, and they go back to talk to the alien. This time she leaves her helmet on. She's the only one.
One of the rare instances of intelligence in the movie.
Yeah. I want to bring up Waylon's little robot legs that are constantly in the background.
And he's creeping as though he's about to engage in a tickle fight.
Yeah, he's looking.
I'm gonna get you.
Yeah, he's looking for that tickle victim.
Wait, did we mention that David found the alien in the pod?
No, we didn't talk about that scene yet.
See, yeah, this.
David found the alien in the pod.
Yeah.
At the
After the eye can show you the world, space holograph.
Oh, he played the.
And then David's all,
Sketch is going on so long.
a dazzling place I never knew, and he's holding the earth. Not when I'm dying, babe, I'm dying. But when I'm way out here, it's crystal clear. Let me share. And then he finds one of the engineers still alive in the pod, and he puts his ear, and he's like, rockabye, baby.
Baby, Betty Bye.
So he found a live one
Yeah, so,
to bring Wayland to.
So before Larry Hardy gets burned, David finds the map room or something. He finds some kind of room with a chair and a flute, and he plays.
What's the bridge?
It could be the bridge. It's like, I don't know if it's meant to mirror how I don't know if it's meant to mirror how the travelers were in the first Alien movie, where they had all of those pods in a circle like that. I don't know if you remember the intro to the first Alien movie, but all of those, it's kind of an extended sequence where all those pods open up, everybody's waking up. But yeah, that room in the ship is very odd, because not only that, but it has that weird, it has the space jockey, it has like this weird thing that hasn't really been explained. I still don't know if it's really been explained. Is it like a navigational device? Is it like the actual cockpit? Like when that thing shows up,
I think that's a safe assumption.
like the gun, the thing that looks like a gun is like a pilot's chair in this crazy horseshoe plane.
Yes.
Okay. Yikes.
Yeah. And I think we're kind of glossing over one of the weirdest parts where he plays the little flute and squishes the egg buttons and that whole contraption.
What is that scene in there? Why is it in there? Why is that scene in there?
Where he plays the flute and discovers the map.
Yeah, why is that in there?
Because it's to tell us that the aliens are headed to Earth.
They were going to be headed to Earth until things went bad.
I don't know how you got that information. Just because they show the Earth?
I think Idris Elba lays it out.
Oh, no, I'm assuming that we haven't heard that yet, though. No, he definitely does lay that out. He definitely does.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, and Lisbeth says it too. She says, "Why do you want to kill us? And why do you want to destroy us after you created us?"
And they're like,
Yeah, that scene's...
I would have liked to have known what David said to the engineer.
Yeah, wouldn't that be interesting? What if he was like messing with, like Wayland's like, yeah, say hello, and he's like, I am your king.
What if he said like,
I bet you can't rip my head off and smash this old guy with it.
Oh yeah.
What if he says like, your mother snores or something?
Oh. Tuk tak me la cook.
Is that what he says?
But that's another really kind of puzzling scene. There's just so many things that are so puzzling.
This movie is really kind of hard to tackle. Why don't we pick up our notes and just go over a few things?
Well, I had one thing that I wanted to mention, which was a part that I liked. A part that I thought, where they, where I want to give the...
Attention, Steve.
A part I want to give the movie some credit for. I noticed a lot of times in science fiction movies and in science fiction TV shows, when we see a spaceship flying through outer space, and especially, when it's intergalactic, the ship is being lit by some kind of unknown light source, which is kind of like the sun, but it's too far away from the sun to be the sun, because once you go to the distance from the sun that Pluto is, the sun is pretty much just another star out there, and it's very, very dark out there. And it's always kind of bothers me when ships are supposed to be out in not in deep space, but far away from any other star or any other system, and it's being lit by some big bright light source, and you never find out what that light source is. In this one, even though it was still lit up from the glowing green clouds of space, it was still dark. and we still saw a dark ship moving through space, and that took some thought behind it. Because normally what they would do is they would have that ship be lit by some unknown light source and have it fly by, but this time they actually let the ship be dark, but lit by, I guess, sort of the soft lighting of the bright stars around, but it was still, something they got right. So, one thing in Prometheus I want to give the movie some credit for.
David.
That's it.
David,
Jeff.
don't you have a note you want to talk about?
What are your findings?
You're a scientist.
Why are all of the characters such self-righteous, pompous assholes?
Well, that's more of a question.
Question.
Yeah. That's more of a question.
Why? Maybe because the movie was written by a self-righteous, pompous asshole. And one of the things I think about is the awkward sex scene with Larry Hardy and I'll call her Elizabeth. After they talk about the fact that she's barren, he goes like, "Oh, you know what? I got something that'll cure your ills. My flesh arrow,
Flesh arrow.
Well, that's the tone of it, because he just jumps on her, like, "Hey, you know what? I'm gonna totally do you now." And then all of a sudden, it's really messy, weird, and their kissing is kind of weird too. That happens, and then right afterwards,
They kiss like assholes.
And so later on, it's right after the scene where the captain is playing that accordion, and Charlize Theron, and she's like, "I'm gonna be a bitch in this hologram room right now." And he's like, "Hey, if you want to get laid, just say so." And she's like, and he goes, "You're a robot, right? Oh yeah? To prove to you that I'm not a robot, come into my room, and I'm gonna shake your system or something like that.
So
I'm gonna give you a solar flare or something."
Shoot your hard drive.
Just as an aside, I don't want to. I'm sorry to interrupt, but just as an aside, I want you to cut that whole rant out and just imagine you hadn't seen Prometheus. Like if you hadn't seen Prometheus, that would be somebody.
You're getting ready to see this Ridley Scott alien movie.
It's like if you hadn't seen it, you'd be like, "Oh, you're the crazy guy at the bus stop."
The captain playing an accordion.
Playing an accordion, it's like Steven Stills, man. You take any scene out of this movie. He's like, yeah, he finds this green goop and it like makes all his life, and he's got worms coming out of it. He's got a snake. And you're just like, what? Like that's in the movie?
And so what I think about is a thing I notice with a lot of other, especially science fiction movies where there is a love scene. I think if you've never been intimate with the opposite sex before, don't write characters doing it, since you don't have firsthand experience, with it, because it comes across as awkward and weird,
So basically you're saying the writers of this movie, they're virgins. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
Way to alienate the audience.
Yeah, wow.
really.
You're going to get a cease and desist.
One of the notes I had at a little moment, does David call Charlize Theron mom?
Or mum.
I think it's a mum.
And I think that's just a polite English programming, I think.
Is it? It's not a reference to Mother, the robot from Alien?
It's kind of tough to call. I would say since he's supposed to be English and a servant, it's kind of a polite English thing.
Well, I think he's also being sassy.
Is he?
He's sassing her.
He's assassin man? He's an assassin?
Yeah.
In what way?
Because she hates him.
And he probably doesn't care much for her, even though he
They have
follows
a sibling rivalry.
Mm-hmm. He follows orders in spite of his feelings about her, not because he respects her.
So does he want to be the real biological?
He wants to be a real boy.
Yeah.
Well, not only does he want to be a real boy, but he wants to be the actual son of Wayland. Is that what that conflict is? Is that
I guess, yeah, because
jealousy?
Dr. Evil Wayland said he's the closest thing to a son I have, or something like that. Yeah, I suppose.
And until you grow a dick, Charlize Theron.
You won't be my son.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, how about that part, the father reveal?
Which is probably the most pointless. Well, that's tough to say, but I'm gonna make that statement right now. It's the most pointless scene in the movie.
You dub that the most pointless thing in the movie.
In a movie filled with pointless scenes.
Yeah,
I would say
that was kind of like, I had already jumped ship from the movie so long ago. It's like when you've tried to be in a buffet, and the food is so bad you leave the restaurant. And you've been standing outside the restaurant for so long, and the father reveal was someone leaning out the window and go, "Wait, I've got rat on a stick." And it's like, no,
I'm done.
no, I'm done. Like,
Yeah.
you can't. You can't entice me anymore. There's nothing. All you're doing now is just being tedious and annoying to me.
Yeah.
It's just. I wasn't even. I was so far out. I wasn't even mad at that point. I was just more like, yeah, more.
Wait,
stupid.
you know a place to get rat on stick?
Not in this neck of the woods. Well, I think it's whenever you do that final kind of like, all right, I'm done with this story. Whenever you check out, that's when it starts to become funny, not like annoying. And I think that's what happened to me, where it's just like, this is so ridiculous.
And she says it in such a reveal kind of way. Father. Dun, dun, dun. Like,
and I hate to harp on this and sound obsessed, but there was a scene like that in Matrix Revolutions. I don't know if anybody other than me remembers that, but
No, I
there's a
don't.
scene. There's a scene with the Oracle and Agent Smith, and it's the same exact thing. And they're both having that fortune cookie talk, and it's both like, oh well, the end is going to be the beginning is the end, and then like Agent Smith says like, well, you would know, Mom. And everybody in the audience that was still there is supposed to go, oh.
you know what's funny? My brain decided that information was that we could make no use of this information. We are deleting this from the archives.
You were just
Deleted that whole movie.
You were just waiting for the S&M clubs. But that's what it reminded me. Again, like all of this kind of like pomp and circumstances of the Matrix sequels is what reminded me of. That, and definitely that scene where it's just like, what does this have to do with the plot or the meaning or the characters? And
You delete that part of the movie and it doesn't change a thing.
It doesn't change the squid alien.
The
Yeah.
movie could have left right after, they had their little talk about a king must fall, and then that would have been it. And
Well, that's another curious thing too, is like, why did it have to be so literal? That's the thing that's also kind of twisting my brain now. Is like they go out of their way to bring back one of those quote-unquote engineer guys to fight the giant squid, to be impregnated, to have the quasi-alien come out. It's like, well, we knew we were watching an Alien prequel. Like, we understand that these events and all these mutations are going to end up leading to that original movie. Did we literally have to be like, oh, wait.
But there's people out there.
it looked like they maybe forgot.
And they had to do it at the end?
We didn't have a xenomorph in there, did we?
Well, they didn't really, even at the end they didn't really. It was just kind of like this quasi one.
It wasn't. No, it didn't have little things on the back, and it didn't have a lot of. It was kind of smaller. It didn't have a lot of the shape, the stuff it needed.
You think somebody was like, oh, where's the alien?
The mouth in the mouth was different.
Yeah.
But there's people out there who saw that ending and it like clicked for them. Like they didn't even think about that until it got to the end of the movie.
Oh, and then they're like,
Yeah.
alien.
What if? What if that alien?
It all just ties together, doesn't it?
It became the other alien. What if, man? Can you imagine?
So it's like a baby alien?
It's like an alien inside an alien in a dream, man.
So are there people who have seen Prometheus but not any of the Alien movies?
I imagine so, and like, not that out of the people that I've talked to, but that would be really interesting to find out. Like, what did you think of this movie in which you have no gateway to?
Right,
Yeah.
and are they
Yeah.
going to go watch Alien and be like, oh, that had shitty graphics.
Yeah, exactly. And they call them graphics. I can't play this movie. Out of my notes, probably the only one that I really want to bring up is the thing that I keep coming back to. I summed it up as, what do dreams have to do with anything? I don't know if the whole being able to read dreams when you're in cryostasis, whatever you call it, was just a cool idea that he had. He's like, let's throw it in there, mate. And that was it.
Boy,
But that has...
what if we could? I have to do what I always see pictures of Ridley Scott. I always see him with his arms folded and kind of slumped to one side.
You need a cigar.
Yeah. What if we could read the dreams when they're in the pods?
Yes, sir. Right away, sir.
We're on it, sir.
Uh-huh.
Good.
Now, when you introduce the characters for the first time, introduce them in reading a dream sequence. We want that to
Okay.
be.
Oh
the
no.
first
Let's. We've seen this movie. I've seen it twice now. Twice, right?
I've seen it 3 times.
3.
Twice. Now.
How many?
Probably 5 or 6.
All right. So, what happened in that dream?
The first one?
Yeah.
Yeah. She's talking
to her father
about her mom that died.
No,
Well, even so, what does that have to do with the rest of the movie?
No. Let's try to stay in that dream.
Okay, I'm there.
And try to figure out what happened in that dream.
Okay.
Doesn't she ask, like, what happens to us when we die? And he says, like, we go to heaven or something like that?
I don't know. We don't.
Yeah, and
you
she
wanna watch
says,
the
"How do you
scene
know
again?
that?" He says,
No,
"That's
I don't
what
wanna watch
Is that
that
where he
scene.
says, "That's what I choose to believe"?
Yeah, I know it. I know that's what it ends on because that's a line that sticks out. I guess. All right. So the point, I guess, that I'm coming to here is that dream sequence is exceptionally unmemorable because none of us can figure out what happens in that dream nor what it has to do with anything else.
I just remember being really confused. Is like, whoa, is the rest of the movie gonna be like this? When I saw it the first time, I was like, is it gonna be weird pixel vision? Like, it can't possibly be, right?
Is this supposed to be 3D?
Yeah, is this like 3D pixels? But I think it's, yeah, on several levels, it's kind of difficult to introduce your characters that way. And also, the information that's in that little scene isn't useful, and actually we don't know what it is.
And it doesn't lead to anything else really, except that conversation that David has with Lisbeth before they find the alien in her stomach.
Mm-hmm.
I watched your dreams. What does it mean? Not really anything. Just something to talk about, I guess.
Your dreams are entertaining.
So I watched your dreams and some stuff happened. Yeah, you got an alien inside you.
Oh yeah, by the way.
By the way.
And the only other thing that I wanted to mention that I wrote down, it's just general complaints about, is this an alien movie, is it not an alien movie? Why name the planet LV-223 when nerds know that the planet's actually LV-426?
I thought it because it wasn't supposed to be the same planet anyway.
That is insanely confusing.
Yeah, why even have an LV?
If it's not supposed to be the same planet, then you could name it anything. It could be Jupiter for all we care. Why not have it in this, like what?
Yeah,
What?
why name it something so similar to for people who aren't super nerds, but like me, I don't remember the exact number, but I knew it was LV something something. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, it's the same one from. I thought it was the same planet.
Well, yeah, why wouldn't it be? Unless they've set up, have they gone to just like a ton of these planets in the same system that have been? Because at this point, when they're exploring the universe, obviously they're just like they're not even giving them names. It's like we ran out of Roman gods, so they're like, all right, this is the LV system. And this is like the fourth planet, from that system and blah, blah, blah. So they're just giving him numbers so you can kind of have a loose idea.
Mm-hmm.
But what? Like, it's in the same... Just in terms of the mythology. Just
Is it in the same system?
Yeah. And, like, if it is, why? Like, did they just set up a whole bunch of planets with all these weapons on them? Why did they set up all these weapons on them? Did they want us to find them?
Are they weapons?
Are they weapons? Was it just them, like, kind of messing about with genetic material and it kind of got loose and destroyed their civilization? What?
Who are they?
What's happening?
And who are we?
Are they Mormons?
They could be. We don't know. We don't know.
They might have been Mormons. They're so white.
Muscular?
There could very well be muscular Mormons. I wouldn't discount it.
Space underwear?
Whoever thought in a million years you'd be seeing a white muscle man fight a squid monster in an alien movie?
That's exactly my point. Yeah,
Well,
I never would have thought the
you
ending
know
of the movie would have been that.
How you were talking about there wasn't a monster in this movie? There was. He was just a monster for 30 seconds.
That's true.
When he comes storming after her, Tyrant from Resident Evil style, coming through, and he's out to kick Lisbeth's ass
For some reason.
She seemed like the only one that had a genuine interest in wanting to know his motivation, and he wants to kick her ass. She seems to be the only one that had any kind of real respect for what was going on and who these guys were. She wants to know why do you hate us or something like that, But he's got this, he's gunning for her, because your friends crashed my ship, I guess, and so I'm coming to kick your ass.
He just wants to kick some ass.
Yeah, because he's that higher being alien that he's supposed to be. He wants to come in and start kicking some ass, pro wrestler style. World Wrestling Federation alien is coming for her, and she defends herself by hitting the button.
Is that supposed to be the guy that was piloting the ship that they crashed? Like he landed, he's like, I'm fine. Is that what that is?
I thought that's what was going on.
That's what I thought too.
I thought it was the same guy. I thought there was only one left.
That's what I thought as well.
And he tried to space jockey it up. They crashed his ship, and then he's like,
What?
and somehow he knows exactly where she is, right?
Right.
Somehow, I guess he crawls out of the rubble, is like, and somehow, David knows he's going after her. Because remember, he's like, he's coming for you, right?
Well,
And,
that's because
he's-
David's head was on the floor in that room.
When he got up, and he could tell by looking at him that he was going after Elizabeth as he disappears over the edge of whatever rubble there was.
Mm-hmm. Clearly.
What do you think, Joseph?
I am just as confused. I was really surprised at that point in the movie that well, I guess this is happening. Like I you know.
But it seems when he initially goes berserk, what sets him off is when one of those guys hits Numi.
Really?
Yeah, because she hits him, and then that grabs his attention. He looks at David, grabs his head, and pops it off.
Really? Well, what does that have to do with anything?
I don't know.
And then why would he want to? Why would he want to beat the hell out of her then?
Then why would he want to come after her?
Exactly.
There's only one guy who can kick your ass.
Me.
That's me. He's stuffing his hand between those closing doors. Oh, I'm coming for you.
Or was he going after her or going after the squid then?
No, he was going after her. He was
What?
choking her, and then she defends herself by hitting the button, and then the squid legs come out.
Maybe that's just how they hug.
Do you?
I love you. I love you so much.
I want you to be my best friend.
You know, we didn't really hear him talk. I mean, they could have had Abraham Lincoln voices. I love you so much. We don't really know. But we have managed.
Stop this goop.
We've managed to find even more nonsense. Like I thought that after seeing it that second time, I was like, oh, we've mined all the nonsense. But no.
Watching this movie is just like swimming through a bucket of nonsense.
Yeah.
A pool of nonsense.
You can't swim in a bucket.
Nope.
Maybe if it was a
You
really
can
big
swim in a
bucket.
pool, though. Though, you know what? There's enough nonsense that perhaps you could swim in that bucket of nonsense.
You could fill a pool with the nonsense. Maybe? Yeah, I don't. I don't know. I don't know. It just seems like a lot of decisions that were made on the fly after the initial script. Because I don't see how you would make those decisions.
Usually scripts are supposed to get better after rewrites.
You would think so, but that's why it has the feel of like, we got the first couple drafts out of the way and we're going to change it's like halfway through the production you change things, and then that's when you don't realize like, oh, when you cut this together it's not going to make any sense.
There had to have been a writer who was on the right side, who wanted to really make a good movie, even though he was thrown this alien prequel thing in his lap, and he really wanted to hang in there. And all of a sudden, these other creative control things came in, and when the Ancient Aliens was coming in, I can picture him being just like, okay,
Whatever.
let it. All right,
Yeah, fine.
I'll get a check at the end of this, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll get to write 2 and 3. And 4. Prometheus 4.
Prometheus.
4.
For me.
Prometheus 4 Furious.
Thanks for listening to the Snobcast. Please send feedback to the snobcastfeedback@gmail.com. Check out our Facebook, Tumblr, and YouTube accounts, username The Snobcast. And remember, never take your helmet off in space.
These are ancient civilizations. They were separated by centuries. They shared no contact with one another, and yet the same pictogram showing men worshipping giant beings pointing to the stars was discovered at every last one of them. And the only galactic system that matched was so far from Earth that there's no way that these primitive, ancient civilizations could have possibly known about it.
Is such a thing even possible? Yes, it is.
Of other microbes that are in there or something.
And maybe that was Earth. I'm assuming it's not, because I think that's actually probably going to be one of the twists they're going to try to pull, is that they didn't really create us.
Oh.
Or something like that.
So you mean all those centuries of Darwinism was Correct.
All that Darwinism. We'll get to
Well,
that.
yeah, maybe we could just skip ahead to that, like the idea of science. Like, I don't know if, like, the first Alien was a hard sci-fi movie, but
The first Alien was a standard slasher flick, right?
With
Except
sci-fi-
placed in space.
sci-fi trappings.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I felt like it kind of made more just general common sense than anything that we kind of see in this, where every decision that's made in this movie has to do with what we want to see in the script. And it's kind of like, why would people do that? Well, people wouldn't do it. The script told them to do it.
Well, this movie has a lot of sci-fi nonsense in it, and sci-fi nonsense is fine, but it's done very poorly in this. Like, there's a lot of just bad decisions they made, and a lot of bad lines that aren't scientific and don't make sense. Like, cheesy sci-fi and like crazy bending of the rules and physics is usually fine in a sci-fi movie, but I think this movie's trying to be a little more realistic, and they use a lot of scientific terms, but it's usually wrong.
Or just a lot of unscientific thinking in it. Or thinking, or the supposed scientists don't have the kind of curiosity that you would expect a scientist to have, you know, when they're in the situation that they're in. Like, you would expect them to you know, I think perhaps on the writer's part they were afraid they might make it boring by making the scientists too much of brainiacs collecting rocks and, you know, being a little closer to how they would behave in that situation. Fuck the plane. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep rolling even though the plane was rolling. But,
Fair.
like, you know, I mean, one example is the taking off the helmet scene.
Out of everybody that you talk to, I have talked to many people about this movie, and that is the one scene that they mention. I mean, if they're talking about, like, man, that was disappointing or whatever, that is the one thing that they bring up. And there'll be another memorable scene later that we'll bring up that they always mention too.
It's just one of those things where it's like, our Earth-based instruments detect no problems on this alien world. Let's take off our helmets. Why doesn't one character go, wait, but our instruments are as much as we know from Earth, like, or any other planets we've visited before. This is still one planet that may have that other thing that we're not ready for. So let's keep the helmets on. And sure enough, there are things out there that they weren't expecting, such as the fucking snake worm rape black goo creatures.
Which they didn't respond to like any human being, high or not,
Right.
would either. Nobody would respond to that. You're trapped in a cave and you baby talk
Yeah.
a deadly cobra, a vagina cobra.
No, look. Even though you haven't seen anything to suggest that this thing will attack you, you know, why are you going to cuddle up with that thing? How
No-
stupid are you?
no
Or you're a
clue.
scientist.
The scientists in this movie make a lot of bad decisions, and that's really ridiculous, because I think if it was a $2 trillion scientific expedition, there'd be a lot of protocol, you know?
Yeah.
And I think number one on the list would be don't take your helmet off, but
Yeah,
they don't seem
exactly.
to have any kind of protocol or plan, really.
Playing devil's advocate, though, like, I'm sure just to get it to fit, the writers would say, well, it's not like a government project, it's by this megaloman, you know.
Well,
I can't
because
even
that-
say the word.
Yeah, this is different
trillionaire.
because
Yeah, there you go.
this is different because it's a private company with so much money at stake. Yeah, like they
Yeah.
wouldn't have protocol.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also, I think it's trying to remind us of Alien and the way those characters were supposed to be like truckers in space, just everyday people in space, and that's
Yeah, but
they-
it was all right that they made poor decisions here and there because they were just truckers in space, whereas these are supposed to be scientists.
but they're the same characters.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and it should have been played a different way. Once you kind of realize that, there needs to be kind of like an adjustment made, where it's like, oh, okay, maybe these people think differently than truckers in space.
Well, let's talk about the characters. What would you want to see in these characters? We talked about how they're not really good scientists.
I would have been happy if they went ahead and just took characters that worked from the previous movies and just implanted them into this one.
Well, I think Lisbeth Numi.
Elizabeth Numi.
Elizabeth Numi was.
She's supposed to be Sigourney Weaver, right?
Yeah, and I think she did a good job, and her character's all right. Her character acted more or less like a scientist most of the time.
Well,
she did take her helmet off,
yeah.
but she fought against it.
And she's supposed to be a scientist who gathers facts, and she says, "This is what I believe because this is what I choose to believe." Like,
Don't get me started on that believe line.
So yeah, so there's the Ripley lookalike. There's the somewhat supposed to be tough guy Marine guy who's not a Marine, who's supposed to be a scientist for some reason, who we've dubbed Larry Hardy because he looks like Tom Hardy's brother. I really, seriously, when we were watching this movie, I thought that was Tom Hardy for halfway through the movie, and I was like, oh wait, that can't be,
yeah.
because he's the size of a truck because he's filming Dark Knight Rises. But like, I guess he's a character.
So after the alien drinks the stuff and dissolves, then we cut to the scientist, and they find a cave painting, which is for some reason important.
We should note that they act amazed at finding this cave painting. This is a huge discovery. Okay? This cave painting has been replicated by different cultures all over the world without any possible way of them being connected. So this is a big find.
Yeah. Which they explain later.
Okay, so yes, so the grab bag of characters, right?
Yeah, so we introduce them. We are introduced to the crew. We find out they were 2 years in cryo sleep, and then they wake up and they get briefed on the mission.
They get a hollow briefing.
They get a hollow briefing, a little hollow introduction, follow up by a little Rubik's Cube show.
By analyzing the information we have from everything to beginning to end, we assume that someone approached these guys and said, "We're not going to tell you the mission, but there's a lot of money involved, and you're going to go into cryosleep for 2 years, and you're going to go to the other side of the galaxy. Are you in or out?"
Sign me up.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. Right?
Everybody said, "Yep, haha, yep."
Yeah, so that's one of those things. I mean, that's something. I mean, I feel like that's something that would come up in a screenwriting class. If I wrote that,
Yeah,
and brought it to school, I'd get an F.
that's one of the biggest crimes of the whole movie is not developing why these guys decided to go in cryosleep for 2 years for no reason at all.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't think you would get an F, but your instructor would definitely say, like, you probably want to rethink that.
You should develop this a little bit more.
Ridley Scott help you with this?
Yeah, this seems like a Ridley Scott screenplay, and it's more perplexing with all the twists that happen later on, as to why it has to be so secretive.
What's secret? Oh, you mean the mission is
Yeah.
secretive? Yeah, we don't really know why. And that scene with the Rubik's Cube and the hologram, that's where a lot of bad science really starts. We find out it's all based on this ancient alien theory. You know, talking about there's a 5-planet system that are aligned, and the only system that matches it is this one out here. And, you know, I think you need a few more measurements than some dots on a wall to define, you know, a very specific system in the middle of space.
Yeah, you should give them their kudos. They were able to really kind of pinpoint. How many stars did they have on there? Like 7 stars?
Something like that,
And
yeah.
they're like, oh, we know exactly where to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And oh, what do you know? There's a little moon right there.
Yeah, they, you know, with the setup, it could have worked if they had developed it enough as to why, therefore, this means this.
If Ridley Scott and the writers wanted the story to be about these engineers that came to Earth and made us, couldn't they have thought of a different way they left evidence instead of this bullshit conspiracy theory? You know?
I don't know. Maybe he
you're saying that it was an invitation to come visit them?
come on, knock on their door.
Yeah.
It led them there. I mean, that's what the movie is telling us.
Yeah.
That's the you know, kicking off point for the movie.
Yeah.
But I mean, they could have just misread the cave paintings.
Well, what would those
You know,
You don't know that at the beginning, though. You just think it's a cave painting, and
But
that's fine.
But they are acting
yeah.
like it's a big
So
deal.
it gets you intrigued.
Yeah.
You're intrigued. So then I think in what we agreed when we were rewatching it is one of the best scenes in the movie is watching David kill time.
Yeah, that's a great sequence.
That should have started the movie.
Because
Absolutely.
honestly, that's something I've always thought about is the long periods of time. If you did, you know, space travel, the time it takes and the cramped space that you're in, and it's fascinating.
What I don't understand though is I guess we don't know enough about how that robot technology works. Why couldn't they just turn him off or something?
I guess that the idea was just kind of like with Ash in the first movie, is that they needs to be somebody to have to look after the ship, make sure that, you know, something doesn't go wrong, or that they can, you know, kind of write something if something does happen.
Could be his own choice too, because he wants to spend the time learning and watching Peter O'Toole movies.
Right, right. That seems like that's a big part. We should also mention too, like that Ash was an android was a big reveal in the first Alien, and this one you kind of take that for granted. It's kind of everybody's like, oh, you're a robot. Robots are like
nobody likes robots.
Yeah, they're like second-class citizens. Like, okay. But that, I mean, that goes back to the idea of having to see the first Alien to kind of get a lot of things out of this movie, because it depends on you knowing all this iconography and characters. So
far the movie's pretty interesting, even though we don't like the characters.
I think we kind of like David. He's interesting to watch.
Yeah. Then we're introduced to the whole crew of the ship. They all come out of cryosleep. Charlize Theron is the first one. She's doing push-ups.
She's tough.
Because she's tough.
She's a tough girl.
One.
While other people are throwing up, she's doing push-ups. Because she's a tough girl.
I bet she threw up.
We just didn't see it.
Yeah. So we get introduced to her, and she's a real tough one. And then we get introduced to the rest of the crew, which is a real grab bag of cliched characters.
Yeah, it feels like Ridley Scott opened up a sampler pack of cliched characters and just dumped it.
And why do you feel that way? Do you feel that way because they just don't have any backstory? They feel like they don't have any backstory.
They feel like they just started existing once the movie started rolling.
I wouldn't say that they're stereotypical characters so much as characters that say stereotypical lines, because they have no characterization other than that.
They exist just.
There's the biologist who's like, "Oh man, what's going on?"
Idiots. I love biology. The biologist.
Yeah, we have the biologist and we have the geologist who's just in it for the money.
Mm-hmm. They don't say it, but they say things along the lines of, "I didn't sign up for this," you know.
Yeah. What was that guy's name?
Falafel.
I love rocks. I love falafel. I love falafels. I love rocks. And I love making money.
Do you know how hard it is to find falafel in deep space? Very hard.
All they got is Chinese food.
I know, they have tons of chopsticks.
All right, welcome to episode 2 of the Snobcast. We're going to be discussing Prometheus. As always, this conversation will contain spoilers. We'll be discussing the movie from beginning to end.
Look, I'm just a geologist. I like rocks. I love rocks. Now, it's clear you two don't give a shit about rocks, but what you do seem to care about is gigantic dead bodies. And I don't really have anything to contribute in the gigantic dead body arena! I want to go back to the ship, if you don't mind.
All right, let's get started. I'm your host, Jeff Bateman. With me today is David.
Heyo.
Steve.
Yo.
And Joseph.
Hello.
All right, and today, of course, we're talking about Prometheus. Let's talk about what our expectations were. Think about when you first saw this in the theater. What were you expecting?
Expectations probably come from the trailer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the trailer was cut in the same exact way as the 1979 Alien. It had that very distinctive sound effect. So it's like, oh, okay, so this is going to be...
A horror movie.
A sci-fi horror movie.
Like Alien, because we all had heard it was an Alien prequel, or maybe it's a remake, and, you know, that we kind of got over that when we first heard that news.
Yeah, because first of all, that doesn't make sense. Like, how can you have both? Like, it's got to be more or less one or the other, right?
You would think so.
You would think so. I mean, no sane person would do that, right?
Yeah. All right, well, let's get into it. So, the movie starts off. What happens? The opening shot. Everybody talks about how great the opening scene is, and you know, it does grab your attention. I thought it was pretty good.
It's a pretty good hook, right? You're
yeah.
Kind of, you know, I don't know if it's a mystery, but you're kind of curious about how it has to do with the rest of the movie.
So the opening scene is it looks like Niagara Falls, not Niagara Falls, but some big waterfall.
Slowly I turn.
And then a very large, pale man with very black eyes drinks some black goop, and then he disintegrates into the ocean, and he disintegrates, and yeah.
And he is looking fit, by
And
the
he
way.
looks really good.
Tight bodies,
Yeah.
loose plots.
I think the reason why he killed himself on that at the waterfall is because he realized that all alone he had no one to spot him.
That's true. What if he accidentally dropped one of those weights?
Those alien weights.
Those alien... they look like skeletons or something. Yeah, so we're not really sure. We get the idea that something is happening because it's showing DNA in 3D.
Yeah, he
blah, blah,
drinks.
blah.
He drinks the goo.
Yeah.
He falls in the water. He breaks apart. We go to, molecular level.
Mm-hmm.
The DNA breaks apart and joins back together.
But it joins back
Does
together
it join-
to create life.
But so it joins back together
Prometheus.
with DNA that was on the planet already in the water.
I think so.
Yeah, some